Peace. All right, so family, I am doing the Sabayat for the Tawi Family Village, and I'm going to basically use this for this show. So I want to thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. This is going to be a little bit different than we usually do, but I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you being in support of what we do here at Gye-nyame Journey and here on the Daily Spark. So remember, we still need people to become candle lighters, become a supporter, and help us push forward. Turn on the recorder. So let's get started. So go ahead. All right. You interrupt my Sabiat about that, doggy? I got it. It's cool. Hey, but we African people, we're very compassionate, and we have a deep love for all beings, which is why we are pretty much in the situation we are in right now. So the title of the talk that I wanted to give today is, let me read it exactly as is, because he already said it. But of course, Brother Hatim had to make some changes. It's how to use the Nguzo Saba daily. Because it's important that we realize that our enemies, regardless of how dastardly we believe they have a set of principles, a set of values that they live by on a daily basis. And in order for us to combat what is happening to us, we have to start consciously plugging in to our stuff. Because something we already know what happened, right? We know about the slave trade. We know about the constant brainwashing, but I don't think we really grasp to what extent this thing has done to us, the work that has been done to us. So the subtitle, because what I really want to talk about was the fractal calendar and why you need to use it. But this thought just kept popping up on my mind as I was doing my research and getting prepared, because those that don't know, I do a show every day. I call it the Daily Spark. I have been doing podcasting for years, and a lot of this stuff comes up out of the podcasting as well as the study before we was even able to do podcasting. Whether sometime the way our lives work, we start seeing patterns, and I start seeing myself being set up for stuff like this. Because I remember what's crazy is, and Elder Cliff will remember this, Nomo used to want to have a private radio station. And he would go to Radio Shack and he would set up a private radio piece where it would only get a couple of blocks. And when he saw that I wasn't shy of talking, he gave me some equipment so that I could start podcast. Well, it wasn't called podcasting there, but I was able to start my channel. So things work in cycles, and I'm gonna get a little bit more into that. But let's talk about what we need to talk about today. Just living our principles on a daily basis, living the Nguzo Saba, wrapping ourselves in our culture to protect us from this fuckery that is going on right now. Excuse me, Mama Margarita. The key piece that I want you to grasp is this. And here's the statement, the subtitle. If I control your space and time, I rule your life and mind. We have our space and our time being encroached upon by outsiders, and they have been encroaching on it in the way they have for at least the last 400 years. And now we don't even look at the world as African people. Everything, and I want you to think about all the measurements. I want you to think about all of the ways we keep track of things. All of the stuff that we use right now is based in their culture. It comes from their culture. Even when we talk about beauty standards, I mean, and a lot of this stuff is old, but we need to go on and rehash it, and we need to start repeating this stuff to ourselves over and over again so that we realize it. When we talk about beauty standards, when we talk about health standards, when we talk about any type of standard that's out there, it's based on a system that comes from them. When they talk about universal, they're not talking about anything else. They're talking about their stuff. They're not talking about bringing everybody else's stuff. And what's crazy is we start falling into it and start believing it. Why? Because they control our space and time. Now, part of the lessons that I give when I'm talking to the young people, or even some of the older people that's in Gye-nyame, one of the first things they have to learn how to do, they have to learn how to define things. We have to start looking at things, and we have to start looking at them and defining them. And one of the first things we start talking about defining, because a lot of people, when they was coming to me, was talking about they was nation builders. And I'm like, well, we got all these nation builders. Where's the nation? Right? Where's this nation that we're building? First off, you ask people what a nation is. Most people can't even tell you. Right? So one of the first definitions that an individual, especially an adult, start working with when they start working with me is the definition and learning the definition of a nation. And I'm going to bring you all the way back to the calendar. What is a nation? A nation is a stable, historically developed community of people with territory, economic life, distinctive culture, and language in common. Now, y'all done heard me say that over and over again because it is a rule of thumb. It is a heuristic that I have ingrained in myself so that I can always fall back on it. Now, what does that have to do with space and time? What does that have to do with the Nguzo Saba? And Nguzo Saba is our culture. In order for a culture to exist, it has to have territory. It has to have territory to operate within. Family, where's the territory that the Tawi family village operates in? Where's the territory? Right? And I ain't just talking about us owning something, because actually I want us to really think about where the territory is, because we done had discussions about it before. What properties, what ideas do we own, do we have that's ours, that connect directly with us and sees the world from our perspective? Now, this is why the Nguzo Saba is important, because it comes directly from us. It comes directly through us. And we have to be willing to go on and start embracing it and find different ways to embrace it so that we can use these principles to truly empower ourselves. Now, how did I get on this? Now, one, I started with Nomo and back then, but I have always been that strange kid. One of the things that I would look at is I would look at spirituality, martial arts, and strange sciences. So one of the first ones I fell in love with was astrology. I ran into astrology. I'm like, wow, I read the books. I'm like, wow, this kind of lines up. And then you start finding out that this is based on a systematic process. The processing of these stars and these constellations. And then you start looking at it and they're based on mythology. I said, oh, mythology. Boom. I get into mythology and I start reading mythology. I'm like, wow, this is people's religion. And then being a Baptist, I was told that everybody else's belief was just that, a belief. But what I was being taught was real. And I couldn't understand the difference between a man walking on water and a man throwing a bolt of lightning. They're both impossible in this day and time. So, but one is supposed to be real and the other one is not. So I had to start questioning the very things that I was being taught. Right? The very things I was being taught to believe in. So now, when I got older, I started noticing that a lot of the organizations that were attractive to me or was attracting me were based on some type of, they had beliefs at the center. As strange as they sounded, the beliefs were at the center. Now, once again, I always come back to Tawi and I ask, what are the myths that we operate on? Because we operate on facts. What I'm telling you right now, family, it ain't the facts that move us. It has never been the facts. Never. There's not a fact, but yet the most dominant organization, prominent organizations in our community are religious based. Those aren't based on facts. Hell, the whole pyramid was built on a myth system. The whole system of government was built on around myths that explain stuff. And the question that we have to ask, what are these myths? What are these cultural ideas? What are these cultural properties or cultural territories that we have control over? So now I start looking at I looked at the astrology, then I went to the numerology. With the numerology, I started seeing, once again, a systematic process that was developed and based on myth and belief, that if you were able to do it right, you could help give people a guide or a better understanding of themselves. Not that you could predict the future, but you would be able to use symbology to help people figure out who they were. So when we look at the numbers, like in our system, we have 0. And when Kwame came in, he basically destroyed my whole concept of 0, because I said 0 ain't even a number. Kwame got inside of Gye-nyame and tore that whole concept up and made sure I understood that 0 was a number, right? I said 0 is a being. It's boom, boom. Nah, 0 is a number, Brother Hatu. All right, cool. So 0 represents God. 1 is interdependence. 2 is cooperation. 3 is communication. 4 is order. 5 is freedom. 6 is family. 7 is study, rest, and perfection. 8 is power. And 9 is completion. All right, boom. What does that have to do with the Nguzo Saba, Brother Hatim, and living in Nguzo Saba? When I started doing the numbers for different people and I started seeing these patterns, I started saying, hey, we can almost work this with anything. Then I ran into African divination. Now, so with the African divination, the first one I was introduced to was Ra Unefer Aman's piece with the Asar Set Society, where they had cards and they were able to take cards and they was able to do readings. Right then I started looking at the history of playing cards that we use right now, that all of us play, where you got the hearts, you got the spades, you got these different sets, and you got these numbers, and that's basically a numerological system that is used to be able to predict the future, or as we do now, use it for games. You can learn different things with it. So I'm like, all right, cool. How can I incorporate this? Then I ran into the Nguzo Saba. As I started running to Nguzo Saba and I started looking at Nguzo Saba, I said, I have to be able to use something like this, because everything else that I'm using is taking me away from myself. Every other system that I was taught to use take me away from myself. For me, if I was to believe any of the other stuff that I had operated in before, I would totally be out my mind, because I would have to strive to be like somebody else. The Nguzo Saba was the first property, was the first territory that spoke to me and said, I belong to you. Right? And I started looking at Nguzo Saba. How do I translate this? So I started looking at Nguzo Saba and I'm like, boom, all right. So I started using it in a certain type of way, and it helped me through college. It helped me in my career. It helped me in everything that I'm doing. It helped me move to where I am right now in my life, to where I'm talking about it right now. So boom, as I start working with it, I started seeing patterns behind it. So I said, cool. Let's look at it. Let's go a little bit deeper. How do we take this territory, this property, and move it to something that could be used on a daily basis? I said, all right, cool. Let's pull back and let's look at it. Number 7. We know 7 because there's 7 principles. 7 is a number that is used cross-culturally. So we have 7 days of the week, 7 keynotes, 7 major colors. I said, wow, why 7? You know, in Gye-nyame, they learned 7 because 7 is the universal number of study, rest, and perfection. Boom, boom, boom. All right, cool. All right, cool. Let's look at this. So as I was doing my show, and I would get up every day and I'd do my show, I eventually said, well, hell, let's start using the Nguzo Saba for the days of the week. So I start plugging in the Nguzo Saba for each day. The first argument I had was, should Umoja be Monday or should Umoja be Sunday? So I settled and I said, well, hell, Imani means face, so let's go on and put Imani on Sunday because traditionally here in America, we go to church on Sunday. So I said, boom, that's Imani, boom, and we start moving forward. So now every day I am able to reflect on one of my principles because of the system. Now, once Kwame got involved with it, he started being able to help me with some of this math stuff to kind of break it down. So, all right. So what is important about looking at your principle or a principle every day? When I take the time and I say great emoji to you, or I say great Kuji Chagalia to you, I am putting my principles out there. I am allowing myself to use something that belongs to me and my people to help define where I am in space and time. I am taking control of my life and my mind when I start practicing and I start recognizing different things with our symbols, with our ideas. Because one of the things that struck me strange was because, like I said, I'm really into mythology and stuff like that. And when I really start looking up like the days of the week, the months, all of these things are named after our enemies, spiritual. They're named after spiritual systems that these individuals came through the world and practiced. I could go through every day of the week. I could go through every month. Every last one as we go through them, and we will find that all of these roots are in their spiritual system. It all traces back to it. And I'm sitting up here like, yo, we trying to battle these people with facts and figures when they're battling us with the very tools that we gave them. In fact, let's segue a little bit. One of the things that Elder Tony West used to talk about a lot was, one, tradition and reason. The last part of his life, those of you that are really familiar with Tony, you know he kept talking about tradition and reason. But in last parts in my conversations with him, because I'm really heavy into AI, he started using the term, it's not artificial intelligence, Brother Hatim, it's African intelligence. It's African intelligence. I mean, what you mean? It's just trust me, it's African intelligence. So I started doing research, and I'm gonna post a video. I'm gonna post a video from a white boy from a TED Talks speech where he talks about the relationship between all of these computers, all these cell phones that we use, that's in connection to our systems. Now, and this was even deeper. AI is changing the world. Computers supposedly changed the world. Cell phones have changed the world. But every last one of these things are based on our myth system, our divination system. But yet and still, we don't plug in. So when I say African intelligence, I'm being very serious, because even when we trace it, when we look at AI, if we go back, we'll see that the Moors taught the Europeans the divination systems, which relied on what they called a binary code, on off. They taught them that. They kept it. Out of that came a form of algebra. Out of that algebra came another form of algebra, and eventually calculus. And out of that came an understanding of the binary code in the way that we're using it now, that's now being used in the very machines that all of us are sitting on right now watching, based on a myth system that we have, based on a spiritual system that we developed, that we are still practicing. But yet and still, when Brother Hatim say, hey, we need to say, rather than Monday, we need to say Moja. We need to focus on our things. We need to ingrain this into our children so that they can start seeing themselves and putting themselves first. Because right now, one of the things that we have as a people, we have the belief that in order for us to do better, we have to suffer. Whose belief system is that? Where does that come from? That's not us. That's never been us. Now, all of a sudden, this is what's reality for us. So when we start talking about living in Nguzo Saba and practicing on a daily life, it's as simple as just calling out the word and looking at it and knowing how the rest of them fit together. So now let's get to the fractal calendar. I call it fractal because a fractal is a self-similar replicating thing. So when I say a fractal, for example, in nature is full of fractals. It's like if I take a V shape and I extend the V shape, I make it smaller, and then I copy it. Those small V shapes will eventually grow into something that look like a V on a larger level, right? So what it means is that it's self-similar. So on a microscope, for example, if I was to look at one of your cells, that cell would look like, in a sense, like your body, just like we are a fractal of the solar system and the galaxy. So when we talk about fractals, we're looking at a system that breaks down smaller and smaller into itself. So when we talk about the fractal calendar, what we're talking about is looking at the Nguzo Saba not only on a daily piece, but being able to look at it on a 365-day year and be able to look and have something to focus on every day. So for example, on the fractal calendar, the day is May 10th, if I'm correct. May 10th, we are standing on the day of Amani. We're standing in the cycle of Ujamaa. It's the last cycle of Ujamaa. We are in the cycle of Ujima, and we are in the year of Ujima. Now, just with that, I am defining my space and time, not according to their system, but according to ours. I'm letting you know where I'm standing in our reality. Now, Ujima means collective work and responsibility. We know that, hopefully, right? So I'm in the year of Ujima, which means as a group, we should be working on and practicing mastering Ujima, right? I'm in the cycle. So when I say a cycle, so we know what the year is, 365 days. Now, in our calendar, we break down the calendar rather than in 12 periods, we use in 7. So we break it down into 7 periods of 49 days. So that's a cycle. So rather than 12 months, we have 7 cycles. Each one of these cycles is named after, guess what? Those that get it, right? We named after one of the Nguzo Saba, right? Now, so those cycles are 49 days. That brings us up to when we take the whole year, we have a 343-day year. Now, what happens with the rest of the time? The rest of the time, we have 22, every 4 years, 23 days that are extra. They're not extra. We call it, I'm going to show you what we call it. We call it Kwanzaa season, or we call it the Great Pause. What do you do in the Great Pause? In the Great Pause, you take time to reflect on how you've been practicing your principles all year. You take time to reflect. Kwanzaa season, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing anyway? All I'm trying to do is give us tools that we are able to go and start snatching back our time and start snatching back some of our space, not just the physical space, but this space in our minds, the space in our books. Because it's cool for us to go all the way back in history and do all the research for all the historical pieces. That's beautiful. But what are we doing that we can use right now? That we could use as weapons to save not only our minds, but save our children's. And our children's mind. Because right now, we already know that when we send them to school, we're sending them basically to brainwashing. But we have just basically surrendered to that fact that it's okay because everybody else got to do it. What happens when we start sending or getting people inside these institutions and get them to start working and exposing our children to our way of seeing the world? I think I could stop there. Is that long enough, or do I need to go farther? All right. I'm going to stop. I want to thank y'all for listening and give me I'm going to go a little bit more in depth in August, because in August we're going to work not only with this fractal calendar, we're going to work with the narrative maps. Those you in here who have received, I think almost everybody in here got the narrative map, and it's uncounted. It's pretty accurate. Mine's was, and I haven't had that many complaints. But I want us to really look at the tools that, in a sense, our ancestors are dropping in our laps that we might not be really focusing on. We're focusing on a lot of other shit that really, when it comes down to it, might not even do anything for us. But this right here, this whole system of the Nguzo Saba, this is all ours. This is our territory. And it's ours to live and to build with, or to allow somebody else to come in and see what it is and take it over. And next thing you know, Kwanzaa is going to be West Asian. Just saying. I'm just saying. And Nguzo Saba, it's going to be all English, and they're going to claim it because it's another tool that we done created, that we done allowed them to take and use how they want. So I'm going to stop right there. Thank you for your time.